There is a silent type of suffering that doesn't yell. It doesn't manifest in breakdowns or weeping. It manifests in the way you overexert yourself, in the way you stay awake late replaying dialogues, fearing you said something amiss, in the way you laugh slightly harder, smile slightly longer, hoping an individual might at last notice you. It is the throb of desiring to be desired, and it begins earlier than most individuals comprehend. When you are young, love isn't a thing you grasp. It's a thing you inhale. The inflection in your mother's voice as you speak. The manner your father gazes at you when you present him something you crafted. You don't understand what attention is yet, but your system recognizes how it feels to be unseen. That is where the narrative starts for the majority of us. Not in maturity, not in heartache, but in those minor, hushed instances when we discover that affection wasn't assured. Perhaps you were the child who needed to earn it, get high marks, be courteous, make others laugh, preserve the peace. You didn't merely desire to be loved, you needed to be worthy of it. And that is when something nuanced occurs inside the human spirit. When love turns conditional, attention turns to oxygen. You begin to gauge your value in the reflection of another's eyes. And even after you mature, that old programming doesn't fully depart. You can observe it in how adults pursue approval like youngsters holding up artwork saying, "Look what I made, do you approve?" Different context, same inquiry. Do I matter to you? The urge to feel desired isn't a flaw. It's one of the most primal human drives. Evolutionary psychology actually confirms this. Belonging and acceptance were survival mechanisms. Being desired meant being in a tribe, being safeguarded. Rejection signified isolation, and isolation signified peril. Our nervous systems still retain that. That is why being overlooked can ache as much as bodily harm, truly. Brain imaging reveals that social rejection triggers the same areas that handle physical discomfort. So when you state, "that hurt," you are not being figurative. You are outlining something biologically tangible. But at some point, this survival drive morphed into an emotional currency. We began bartering pieces of our identity to feel noticed. We started shaping who we are to match what others might desire us to be. It's nuanced. You might not even perceive when you are doing it. You consent to things you don't support. You chuckle at jests that don't amuse. You claim it's all right when it isn't. And you label it compassion or maturity or maintaining harmony. But deep inside, it's the child within you whispering, "If I keep them happy, perhaps they won't go." And the reality is, that voice doesn't disappear just because you mature. You simply learn to disguise it. You label it ambition. You label it service. You label it being reliable. But what you're truly pursuing is that primal sensation of being required. There's a point in every individual's existence when they realize they've been acting for affection. You reflect and see all the instances you attempted to change yourself, so you could at last be picked. You recall the quiet after a message you sent too openly. You recall being in a space filled with people but feeling unseen regardless. That's when it dawns on you. You've been pursuing reflections, not connection. Because being desired and being comprehended are not identical. Most of us accept the first one because it's simpler to obtain. We believe if someone desires us, it means they perceive us. But at times, they only perceive the iteration of us that gratifies them. And we confuse that attention with love. We've all experienced it. You encounter someone and abruptly you feel vibrant again, like all the unseen segments of you are at last being acknowledged. But then, as time unfolds, you realize they didn't adore your essence. They adored your mirroring of their own longing. You provided them what they required to feel desired too. It's shared vacancy masked as connection. And it's no one's error. We all bear that identical hunger. To be significant, to be selected, to be adequate. Some individuals pursue it via partnerships, some via success, some via aiding others. but the path is identical. We desire someone to look at us and state, "You don't need to do anything. You are already significant." But most of us never received that, not from our parents, not from our educators, not from the world. So we constructed our entire existence attempting to earn a phrase that should have been unconditional. Sometimes you'll perceive it in the tiniest things, how your spirits rely on someone's response, how quietness feels like a reprimand, how a kind word can alter your entire day. You believe you're just being delicate, but no. You're reacting to the old emotional framework of childhood. When you were little, every approval signified safety. Every rejection signified peril. So you learned to interpret faces like charts. You analyzed inflection, timing, energy. You learned when to talk and when to remain silent. That's emotional survival, and many individuals never move past it. Psychologists frequently label this attachment conditioning. It's the manner our earliest emotional histories forge unseen patterns that mold how we approach love, career, and selfhood. If you needed to earn affection as a child, you'll likely continue earning it as an adult, even when no one is requesting it. That is why individuals remain in depleting partnerships. That is why individuals overextend themselves just to be seen. That is why so many of us confuse attention with affection. We don't truly desire renown. We don't truly desire validation. We desire the emotional parallel of being held as a child, the sensation that someone perceives us fully and remains. But here is where it becomes complex, because once you begin pursuing that feeling externally, you forfeit command of it. Your tranquility becomes contingent on how another individual perceives you, and that is the most delicate form of contentment. Envision holding a balloon containing your self-value, but another person holds the string. You can only feel positive when they opt to hold on. That is what occurs when your feeling of value is borrowed rather than built. The irony is that the more you require being wanted, the more you forfeit the very qualities that make you desirable. You begin diminishing your truth. You conceal your viewpoints. You dim your brightness so you don't make others uneasy, and eventually you forget who you were before you began performing. That is why individuals say things like, "I don't recognize who I am anymore." Because when you dedicate years to being what others desire, you turn into an assortment of reactions instead of a person. But here is the lovely irony. The instant you cease trying to be desired, you become compelling. When you cease pursuing approval, you emit it. People can sense when you are no longer vying for their acceptance. There is something compelling about quiet self-acceptance. It neutralizes people. It makes them trust you. Because in a world filled with performers, authenticity feels like tranquility. Still, let's be truthful. Releasing that urge isn't simple. You can't just instruct your inner child, "Stop worrying what people think." That child still recalls the nights they felt overlooked. They still recall attempting to make someone proud and seeing them look elsewhere. So healing it involves reparenting yourself. It involves learning to provide yourself what you once pleaded for. To whisper to your younger self, "You're protected now. You don't need to earn love any longer." When you start doing that, something remarkable occurs. You cease requiring others to fill that void, and instead, your relationships become about sharing love, not verifying it. That is the silent change that no one informs you about. The instant when you cease pursuing value and begin embodying it. But reaching that point requires awareness. It requires noticing yourself in those minor moments of seeking. When you check your phone awaiting a response. When you warp your truth to prevent conflict. When you offer more than you possess just to retain someone. Those are the small hints directing to the larger injury. And here is the point. It's not degrading to need to feel desired. It's human. It is one of the most unadulterated expressions of our mutual vulnerability. Even the most resilient, assured people you know bear that identical concealed wish. To be significant to someone. To be recalled. To feel like their existence makes an impact. What is important is not eradicating that need. It's comprehending it. Because once you comprehend it, you cease letting it steer you. You cease being fearful of being solitary. You cease attempting to dazzle people who don't even see your exertion. And gradually the equilibrium changes. You start selecting people who select you in return. You start creating rather than acting. You start grasping that being desired is not the objective. Being complete is. The more you age, the more you grasp that most people aren't pursuing achievement or position or even affection. They're pursuing significance, that silent confirmation that their being means something, that they are important in the vast, dense, fluctuating world. And that is what the urge to feel desired truly is. A yearning for evidence that you're not unseen, that your being ripples through someone's existence in a manner that renders them gentler, safer, or more vibrant. But the issue is, when you root your value in being desired, you pass that evidence to someone else to possess. And people, even the kind ones, are unreliable, they get occupied, they get diverted, they shift. And when they do, it can seem like your value vanishes with them. That is why so many individuals confuse being desired with being loved. Because wanted feels instant, it feels comforting. It's that message that illuminates your display. It's the conversation that arrives when you are beginning to lose hope. But wanted is fleeting. It's emotional gravity that wanes when focus shifts. Love, however, love is more subdued. It doesn't yell your name. It lingers even when no one is observing. But most of us never learn to await that form of love. Because the world imparts urgency. It imparts you to validate yourself swiftly, to maintain people's interest, to secure your spot in someone's life before they substitute you. So we continue rushing. We continue performing. We continue clinging to the fantasy that if someone desires us intensely enough, it will mend everything that preceded. But it never does. Because attention cannot mend what neglect fostered. It can only divert you from it for a short time. There's a proverb in psychology that what isn't mended gets replicated. And you can observe that reality in how people succumb to the same cycles repeatedly, the same emotionally unavailable partners, the same friendships where you offer and offer until you vanish. It's not a flaw, it's a repetition. Your heart continually attempts to redraft an old narrative, hoping that this round, the conclusion will be different. And perhaps that is what maturing truly is. Grasping that no one else can redraft it for you. You can't compel your parents to see the exertion you made to be good. You can't compel that friend to finally acknowledge the ways you were present. You can't require someone to select you with the same fervor you select them. You can only learn to exist in the quiet they created, and not permit it to define you any longer. That quiet is weighty, but it's also hallowed, because it's in that void where something profound starts to occur. You start grasping that the love you kept seeking was never intended to arrive from another person first. It was intended to begin inside you. Not in a self-improvement cliché manner, but in a profoundly human manner. When you commence treating yourself like someone desirable, your entire emotional terrain shifts. You cease pleading for attention and start commanding it via authenticity. You cease performing for love and start emitting it innately. Because nothing is more compelling than someone who has found peace with themselves. That is what emotional maturity appears to be. Not feigning you don't care, but caring in a manner that doesn't ruin you. You still desire connection, but you no longer implode without it. You still desire to be wanted, but you do not warp your soul to match someone else's criteria for lovable. And that change is nuanced but transformative. It's the distinction between stating, I wish they desire me, and I wish I remain true to myself, even if they do not. The reality is, when you cease seeking to be desired, you start attracting individuals who truly perceive you. Because they're not attracted to the performance. They're attracted to the tranquility. They sense the stability in you, and they rely on it. And when two individuals connect from that place, it's no longer about filling a void. It's about generating meaning collectively. But even then, The urge to feel desired doesn't vanish completely. It just transforms. It becomes less about validation and more about contribution. Less, do you perceive me? And more, can I bring something good to your life? That is the beautiful irony. The instant you no longer pursue being desired, you begin desiring others in the most genuine way. Not to make you whole, not to mend you, but just because love, when it's not frantic, becomes giving. Still, the remnants of the old urge visit at times. Perhaps you'll browse through your texts and feel that prickle of being overlooked. Maybe you'll enter a space and feel like you don't fit in. Maybe you'll still wish, just for a moment, that someone would gaze at you the way you've always gazed at others. And when that occurs, be compassionate with yourself. Because mending isn't about eradicating those instances. It's about comprehending them. That pain isn't a flaw, it's recall. It's your heart recalling what it was like to be unseen and requesting confirmation that it won't be forsaken again. So, offer it that confirmation. Halt. Inhale. Remind yourself that you're no longer that child awaiting a sign of approval. You're the one meeting your own gaze now. You're the one who determines that you are significant. And when you do, life begins to feel altered. You start to see the quiet things, the daylight on your skin, the comfort of a discussion that doesn't require anything, the way you can sit solo and still feel complete. You grasp that being desired was never the peak form of love. Being at peace with yourself is. Most individuals dedicate their whole lives trying to be seen by others. Very few ever learn how to perceive themselves distinctly. But the ones who do, they navigate the world differently. Their contentment isn't up for debate. Their value isn't conditional. Their being feels rooted, serene, unmovable. And ironically, those are the individuals everyone ultimately desires, not because they're pursuing attention, but because they manifest something everyone else is seeking. Inner equilibrium. It's not overt. It's not performative. It's quiet, but it's certain. You see it in the way they communicate, in how they no longer debate to verify their value, in how they can separate from people who don't select them without hardening their heart. That's genuine strength, not the type that controls, but the type that remains gentle in a harsh world. And that's what occurs when you cease requiring to feel desired. You start becoming complete enough to desire others for who they are, not what they provide you. You cease internalizing love. You cease internalizing rejection as evidence of your deficiency. You start grasping that people's ability to love you is more about them than it ever was about you. That comprehension is liberation, because once you see it, you cease gauging your value in another's possession. You cease pursuing love like it's an award and start living like it's your essence. You were born desired, not because an individual stated it, not because you merited it, but because existence itself required you here. You're composed of the same cosmic dust that builds galaxies. You were never an error. You were never a mishap. You were the cosmos's method of expressing itself distinctively, once in all of existence. That's what being desired truly signifies. It's not about being liked, commended, or recalled. It's about recalling yourself, recalling that your life as it is presently has significance. You don't have to pursue that significance in someone's gaze. You already bear it in your pulse. And perhaps that's the quiet reality most people dedicate their entire lives trying to discover. You don't need to be desired to be worthy. You just need to be here, fully, bravely, authentically here. Because when you finally cease asking, do I matter to them, and start asking, how can I matter to myself and the world around me, everything shifts. That's when the narrative changes, from survival to generation, from approval to authenticity, from being desired to being complete. And maybe, in the end, that's what affection was meant to teach us all along. Not how to be selected, but how to select ourselves completely without condition.